Hello everybody, my name's Mac. I'm 15 years old, I'm located in Langley, BC, and I'm part of the Otter Flying Feathers 4-H Club. And today I'm going to be sharing with all of you one of my favorite recipes of how to make blueberry cranberry muffins. One of the reasons I love this recipe is, of course, it's delicious, but also, since I'm located in BC, there's lots of blueberry and cranberry farms all around me, allowing me to buy my berries directly from the farms, knowing that they'll have a rich, delicious taste. As a matter of fact, BC has over 800 growers of high-bush blueberries, and BC is the largest producer of cranberries in the whole of Canada. So without further ado, let's get right into the procedure. The first thing we'll need to do is gather all of our ingredients and supplies. So the supplies you'll need for this recipe is 2 cups of flour, a half a cup of sugar, a half a cup of oil. Now you can use any vegetable oil. I'm going to be using canola oil, one, because it's tasteless, so it's great for this recipe, but also because this canola oil was produced in Canada and I want to support our canola oil farmers in the prairies. You'll also need 1 cup of milk, a half a cup of dried cranberries, and a half a cup of fresh blueberries. You will also need 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 egg. Now, these are all the required ingredients, but there's also 2 ingredients that I've added to the original recipe that are optional to include, but that I think add some nice flavor and make the muffins less boring. And that is 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 1 lemon for lemon zest. Again, these 2 ingredients are optional and I'll talk more about them later. Some other stuff you'll need is 2 mixing utensils. I've chosen a large fork and a small wooden spoon, but you can use whatever you want. A whisk would work just as well. You'll also need 1 large spoon for scooping the batter. You will also need a muffin tin. It should have 12 available cups in it because this recipe makes 12 muffins. You'll also need 12 muffin liners. Now, for whatever reason you don't like muffin liners because they can sometimes stick to the muffin when you're trying to peel them off, or if you just don't have any available, you can always grease your muffin tin. Again, it's a matter of preference. Now, lastly, you'll need 2 different mixing bowls. You'll need a medium mixing bowl and a smaller mixing bowl. Now that we've gotten all our supplies, we can move more on to the procedure. Now, before we get to making our batter, we should preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit so that it's all heated up and ready once we're done making our batter and we don't have to wait for it. You'll also want to line your muffin tin with your muffin liners or grease your muffin tin. So let's do that quickly. Now, a risk that you get if you only grease your muffin tin is you run the risk of the muffin sticking to the muffin tin. This is why I prefer muffin liners. Now that that's all done, it should be noted, lastly, before we get into making our batter, that we want a clean, wiped down surface to work on. If you have long hair, you might want to tie it back so you don't get any of it in your batter. And lastly, you'll want to wash your hands to avoid any potential contamination. Now that that's addressed, we can really get into it. Now, we want to combine in our larger than 2 mixing bowls essentially all our dry ingredients. So our flour, our sugar, our baking powder, and our salt. Now we'll want to select one of our mixing utensils. I'm going to go with my large wooden spoon, and we can mix it all together. Now, seeing as we're only adding powdery ingredients, our mixture will just look like a white powder at this point, but it's still important to mix it all together. Now that that's all mixed together, we can move on to our smaller of the 2 mixing bowls with our wet ingredients. So that includes our egg, our milk, our oil, and of course our optional ingredient, which is our vanilla extract. So if you want to add it, you'll want to do that now. And the point of the vanilla extract is, again, just to add some nice flavor to our muffins. So now we can mix that all together. You'll of course want to make sure that you're breaking up the yolk in your mixture when you're mixing it together. Now the eggs I'm using, or the egg I'm using, is actually produced on our farm, as I live on a poultry farm. And I have other friends that own chickens, and we all agree that our own eggs always taste better than everybody else's store-bought eggs or restaurant eggs. So if any of you watching want the best possible tasting eggs, you all need to go out and buy some egg-laying chickens. And once you taste them, I trust you, you'll never going back. They just taste always so good. Okay, now that this is all mixed together, we can combine our wet ingredients to our dry ingredients. Now you want to do this gradually, because if you just dunk your wet ingredients all into your dry ingredients, you run the risk of getting clumps of powder not mixing in. But if you do it gradually, it's easier to make sure it's all mixing in. Now the consistency of the muffins can sometimes vary, but usually what you're going for this recipe is a more thinner batter than a thicker one. So it'll be quite thin and almost watery, but that's what you want. Okay, so now that that's all mixed together, there's a few more things we need to add to this before it's done. And that is one of the optional ingredients again. And you'll need your lemon. And this is for lemon zest again, to add some nice zesty flavor to your muffins. Now, for those of you who don't know how to make lemon zest, all you need is a potato peeler. Of course, fruit zesters or lemon zesters do exist as a product, but I think potato peelers work just as well, and a lot of you probably have one lying around. And you'll need a lemon. Now, what you're just gonna do is you're just gonna, just like a potato, peel your lemon back, the skin, the yellow skin. And then once you do that, you'll stumble across the white inner skin. Now, this white inner skin is what you want to peel, because this is the zest part you want. And you'll peel it into a bowl, and you'll discard the yellow skin, and this white inner skin will look like, for presentation purposes, I've done this in advance, like this. And these little peelings is what you want to add to your mixture if that's what you choose to do. It helps add some extra flavor. And you want a teaspoon of this, about a teaspoon. And now we can mix that all in. Okay, and now we can get to the two ingredients I know we've all been waiting for, the stars of this muffin. And that's our blueberries and our cranberries. So we can add those in there, and we can mix them all up. We'll of course want to make sure we're mixing it up as evenly as possible, because when we're scooping it into our muffin tins, we don't want to have any muffins that don't have these berries, and we don't want to have any of the muffins that are flooded with these berries and there's too much of them. Mixed it all in there, and now we can take our large spoon and we can scoop them into our muffin tins. I'm going to move this over here a bit. I thought while we're doing this, I'd share some facts I learned about blueberries and cranberries that I thought was quite interesting. And that's that blueberries and cranberries are actually native to North America. Also, the cultivation of cranberries can be traced back nearly 200 years ago. I thought this was quite shocking when I first read it, but I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Cranberries are just so delicious, who wouldn't want to cultivate them? Now, we'll want to be filling up these muffin tins about 2/3 of the way up per cup. Sometimes when I do this recipe, I only get 10 of these filled up, and sometimes I even have room for a 13th to fill up. It all depends on how high you fill them up and how large your muffin cups are, as it can vary a bit between brands. But it would look like I'm going to end up getting 12 of these filled up, which is great, as that's what I was planning for, 12. Now the final preparation step in this recipe is to take your remaining 2 teaspoons of sugar, and you'll want to just sprinkle it on top all of your muffin cups. And this will help create a nice golden brown color when they're cooking in the oven. I'm just gonna finish putting this on. And there we go. And luckily, since we preheated our oven so early in the procedure, it's all ready now to put them in, and it's preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, since our oven's preheated, that means it's very hot. So if any younger audiences are watching, you might want to have your parents do this procedure because you don't want to burn yourself. And even if an older person's doing this, you might want to put on oven mitts, as I'm going to, as if you touch the oven by accident, you're going to get burned. And that is not a fun experience. Okay, so now we can put these right in there. Now these are going to cook for between 20 to 25 minutes. And like I mentioned earlier, an indication of them being ready will be them turning a nice golden brown color and them rising a bit. Now, if you're still not sure that they're ready and you want to be absolutely sure, you can take, after you take them out of the oven, you can take a small fork or a toothpick and poke it in the center of one of your muffins. And if no residue comes up on your toothpick or fork, you know they're ready because they're cooked all the way through. If some residue does come off, then you can put them back in between 2 to 5 minutes and check again. But you want to be constantly watching them as you don't want them to burn. Now, since we have a while to wait, 20 minutes, I thought I'd share some more facts I learned about blueberries and cranberries. So one of the facts I learned is that blueberries were originally called star fruits by the indigenous people of the Americas. And that's because the design on the blueberry, one part of it looked like that of a star. Now, personally, I think that's a pretty cool name, star fruits, and I think we should start calling them that again. As well, cranberries by the earlier settlers were originally called cranberries because the blossom of the cranberry resembled that of a crane's head. And then over time it came to be known from cranberries to cranberries. Now I thought this was very interesting to learn because I always wondered, why would they be called cranberries? I mean, like, if we're following the same thinking process of blueberries, shouldn't they be called red berries? But apparently there's a reason for this. They just came, the name evolved slightly, so it doesn't make as much sense as it did. Would you look at the time? Those 20 minutes went by really quickly. I better check on these muffins. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the oven's very hot. But now, on top of the oven being hot, your muffin tray's oh so hot. So I'm going to make sure I put on my protective mitts again. This is especially important now. And if any younger audiences are watching again, you might want to have your guardian take them out for you. Again, burning yourself is not fun. Got all protected now. And would you look at that? They're all ready. They look nice golden brown, but I want to be sure they're ready. So I'm going to make sure I don't touch it, but I'm going to get a fork with one of them. A small fork, and I'm going to poke it in the middle. And as you can see, there's no residue, which means they're ready. So now I'm going to let them cool for between 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes, because I don't want to serve them warm, of course, but I don't want anybody to burn themselves. So I'm going to wait that time, and then they're ready to be served to friends, family, or even just eat them all yourself. I mean, hey, they're delicious. And you know they have the best possible flavor as you're using BC grown blueberries and cranberries.